On today's show, Steve Ballmer speaks. Going to be reacting to what he said and what we now believe after hearing him on today's Locked On Clippers.
You are Locked On Clippers, your daily Los Angeles Clippers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, sir. You are locking in with the Clips. Thank you for making Locked On Clippers the first listen of your day, your team every day. I'm your host, Darian Vaziri, born and raised in LA. Been a Clipper fan for 20 years, been covering the team on my own YouTube channel, Dime Dropper, for 5, and 3 right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Make sure you subscribe and hit the notification bell so you know every single time we post a video, and you can follow wherever you get your podcast. On today's show, we're going to be reacting to Steve Ballmer's comments, and joining me to talk about them all from the Sporting Tribune, Clipper fan and media member, Grant Money Mona. Money Mona, it's been a crazy couple of days in Clipperland.
It sure has. And Dime, are we surprised? I don't think we are, because listen, we've been around this team for a while. We've watched this team for a while. We were a part of the Sterling stuff. We understand what happened there. This is another wrinkle. This is another thing that they're going to have to deal with. This is something that is very serious. The allegations are serious, as much as we want to think that they're going to be innocent, whatever the case may be. These are serious allegations here, and something that the league is going to take seriously. And now we have some clarity from an actual 16-minute interview from the furious leader of the Los Angeles Clippers. So we have some things now to go by on the Clippers side of it. Obviously, we got all the stuff from Pablo Torre from the aspiration side and the public court side. So yeah, let's get into it, man. It's good to see you, by the way. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, yeah, anytime. And of course, yeah, we're going to be talking about what Ballmer said, reacting to those comments. Do we believe in all this stuff, and how much we do believe about the scandal and the accusations, and of course, what we think will happen. So Steve Ballmer joined Ramona Shelburne, who is obviously, an ESPN reporter and, journalist that is an LA-centric journalist, obviously somebody who has close ties with both LA teams, and spoke and basically said, by the way, this episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Forgot to mention that. Make sure to head on over to FanDuel.com as the NFL season is now underway. Download the FanDuel app by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. So it was basically exactly what we thought it would be, kind of Ballmer saving face, saying, we had nothing to do with Kawhi's deal. We didn't know the terms of it. We got scammed. We got bamboozled by Aspiration. We had a big agreement with them, and that we've always played by the rules. What was your take on seeing Ballmer's 16-minute sit down with Ramona? Do you just feel the same way about what I just said? It's just kind of to save face, or was there anything you picked up from it that is, valuable?
I think there were a few valuable things in there, because the Clippers statement was very harsh. Obviously, when the Clippers made that statement the night that it dropped, or actually the morning of, they seemed pretty angry in that statement. There were a lot of harsh words and statements thrown around. I mean, when something like this happens to a guy of Steve Ballmer's stature and his, obviously we know he's the 6th richest man in all of the earth, not just in the NBA. You could put together all of the owners in the NBA combined, and they wouldn't touch the wealth that Steve Ballmer has. So he seemed angry in this interview. He seemed taken back by it, like they're threatening his integrity. And I think the main thing that I took from the 16-minute interview, I watched it 2 times, maybe 3 times already through, is that the Clippers feel, and not just Steve Ballmer, but the Clippers themselves feel incredibly confident about the league sorting through all of their end of the documents. Because Pablo Torre had the public court documents, he had the aspiration documents. He talked to an aspiration employee that had a voice modulation, which was hilarious. But he didn't have anything from the Clippers side of things. So we were just going based off of obviously the public documents, which are readily available to everyone. But the Clippers seem to have a chronological timeline of everything that happened up until their aspiration deal after Kawhi signed a few months prior to it, in August, and then they went through the whole aspiration deal in November. So Steve Ballmer was very confident, Dime, about their hard evidence that they have as an organization. He welcomed the league to investigate the Clippers. He said, if it were another owner and this happened to somebody else, I would welcome an investigation too. He wasn't running from any investigation. He could have easily been like, we didn't do anything. We don't need to be investigated. It's okay. Like we're innocent. We're clear. And to a certain extent, like he was saying that we're clear, but it wasn't like he was running away from the investigation. He wasn't running away from the allegations. And I think that's the tone that I think he took in the interview.
Yeah. Do you think there's anything that Ramona could have asked that maybe put him on the spot a little bit more? I mean, she did ask about, the $28 million that Kawhi got. What do you know about it? And he said, they approached Kawhi. We knew they approached Kawhi, but we didn't know the terms of, their agreement and stuff like that. He was basically saying that he didn't know any. He kind of just basically was like acted clueless to everything that happened with Kawhi, which obviously, the haters and the people that really want to see the Clippers downfall here, which is mostly those bitter Laker fans that just want to see us suffer by any means necessary, are going to say, oh, he's being shady. And they're trying to find any soundbite, any sort of body language from Ballmer that makes it seem like he's lying. Of course, as you mentioned, Ballmer is one of the best and most successful business people or successful people in the world. So he's definitely been a part of things like this. And he said, I've made good investments. I've made bad investments. This was a bad investment. I got scammed. But is there anything you think Ramona could have maybe put him? And you probably don't think, knowing Ramona Shelburne and her relationship with Ballmer, that she's going to try to, make him look bad, right?
Exactly. We mentioned this before, like it was to clear up things and shed everything in a positive light for the Clippers, but I feel like they did deserve that after all of the stuff that has dropped on them. I feel like this interview was deserved. They did deserve to have a say in this. And, you can make fun of him going on an ESPN interview all you want, but for him to come out a day after the allegations were dropped on an organization of that magnitude, and for him to go out there and actually do something, like, that shows his integrity too, right? Like, not a lot of owners would do that. They'd wait for the investigation to be over. They'd have a press conference in front of their logo in the background and do something like that. But he wanted to get out in front of it. So what I do feel like she could have asked him, because there was a new report that dropped on Thursday morning from the Boston Sports Journal that mentioned that there are additional deals made on Kawhi Leonard's end, and they could have been in synergy with what Ballmer did to extend that money up to around $50 million. So I would have loved to have heard, maybe this interview was done before that. I'm not really sure when this interview was recorded. It was dropped on Thursday night, so maybe they didn't have that information, but I would have loved to see maybe that part of it. I don't think that any of this stuff, he mentioned, I'm going to quote here because Justin Rousseau, who does a great job covering the Clippers, quoted all this stuff. He said, "We, as part of our cooperation with the Department of Justice and the Securities and Exchange Commission, we had produced texts, emails. We had already gone through all of this stuff because of it was part of document production in their investigation." So they gave forth everything that they had. Like, they're pretty upfront. But maybe I would have loved to see them dive into that new wrinkle that we found out about Thursday morning.
Yeah, and by the way, that was from Locked On's very own John Corrales of Locked On Celtics that wrote that article. And yeah, you're right. She only mentioned the 28 million, not the 48 million. But coming up, going to be talking about that new piece of information and what we really think. We'll be talking about that coming up. I got to tell you a little something about FanDuel. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel is making sure you're ready for kickoff with a can't miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Now, the next game for the NFL is tomorrow night at SoFi Stadium. It's Kansas City Chiefs and the Chargers -3. Money Mona, one of my favorite parts about everything you do is that you literally support the same teams as me in damn near every
Yep.
sport. What do you think about our Rams this year? Super Bowl odds. We're in the top 10 on FanDuel for Super Bowl odds, but I think we are exactly 10. We've got the Ravens, the Eagles, the Bills, Chiefs, Lions, Packers, Niners. We're 8th in the Super Bowl odds. What are you thinking? What, you got a Super Bowl pick this year?
I think it's going to be Bills Rams. That's my pick because I think the Rams were the closest team to face off against the Eagles. They were the team that almost dethroned the Eagles last year in the NFC. And I think the Rams are a little bit underrated. I'm seeing a lot of predictions. Like, I feel like the odds are still a little bit too low. I feel like the odds could be a little bit higher, man.
Well, there we go. We're at plus 1,900. So if you agree with Money Mona that the Rams are going to the Super Bowl, go place your bets on FanDuel right now. You got to do it before we get some early wins and maybe build some momentum. Or if it's anything like the last 2 years, just wait till we go on a rough patch to begin the season and then turn it up late. So are you ready to play? Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. All right. So talking about this whole scandal and controversy around the Clippers with the Pablo Torre podcast that is saying that the Clippers circumvented Kawhi Leonard's salary and they're paying him money under the table through Aspiration, which was a fraudulent company. Now, Money Mona, we've talked about our reaction to Steve Ballmer finally speaking and our analysis of all that. But now to the nitty gritty. Clipper fan to Clipper fan. Do we believe it? What does Money Mona believe is the truth?
Now, the circumventing the salary cap, I don't think that they did. Did they do some shady stuff? It seems like it. Now, whether that's on Kawhi's side or the Clippers, I'm not sure yet. Something is shady here. Like, I'm not going to just completely dismiss and be on the Clippers side and be like, hey, they didn't do anything, let's move on. It's going to be very hard for the league to do anything because of the lack of hard evidence. Now, they do have court documents, all that stuff, but the interview that they did with the Aspiration employee, like, that's not enough. I know that because that's where they're getting the salary cap circumvention from. The part that Pablo Torre mentioned about circumventing the salary cap was just a quote from that employee that said they found a text on their phone that said, LOL, they're circumventing the salary cap. That's not enough. Like, you can't just use that as your reference. So they're going to have like really hard evidence. I know there's court documents and everything, but that doesn't really prove that it was going to the Clippers. Ballmer's name was there. The Clippers' name was there. Kawhi Leonard's name was there, and his KL2 Aspire company was there. And there was money going through all of them, but it was never a direct Clippers to Kawhi, Ballmer to Kawhi. It was Aspiration to Kawhi, Ballmer to Aspiration, and then some money to Kawhi. And that's where there's gray area. So I think there's some... Listen, I've said this on my own content time. There's a lot of shady stuff that happens in the NBA everywhere.
Yeah.
And people can deny it as much as they want. They can talk to league executives, and I talked to my buddy in the front office, and they said we're not doing anything. Obviously, they're going to say that. I think there's shady stuff happening everywhere, and this is just a leak that happened to get through.
Yeah, the thing that, obviously from our perspective, we're Clipper fans. We've seen Steve Ballmer as the savior of our franchise and would never want to believe that he'd, do something like this and pay Kawhi to the table. And why? We know Kawhi Leonard was never going to go anywhere after he'd already signed with the Clippers. We know that no team was going to really I don't know about no team, but I don't know if anyone was going to break the bank for him coming off a torn ACL. We still paid him the max. We'd given him all this, all these benefits in terms of like giving him, the medical staff. We've been on par with his, requests with load management. And we've never had I know there was that Randy Shelton scandal. Remember that a couple of months ago? But
yeah, I do.
That was a real nothing burger where nothing happened. Because I don't think Like the complaint was that the Clippers were forcing Kawhi to play, but Kawhi has constantly re-signed with the Clippers. He and, as La Marie always says, he and the Clippers have been lockstep from day one. Now, the shadiness when it comes to this, the first thing that I thought was strange was paying Kawhi Leonard that much money without him doing anything and having all those, points in the contract that said he essentially doesn't have to do any promotion if he doesn't feel like it. What were your thoughts on that part? Because that was where I was like, okay, they can't really bust us if we did anything because in the contract it says that he does not necessarily have to do anything, but that's still a little weird for a sponsor of someone,
I think what it is the optics are bad. Like when you look at it and you really think about it, those optics don't look good. But if the contract says that he doesn't have to do anything or that he, has to essentially just sign his name and that's it, then that's what he has to do. Now, there is some language in those contracts that Pablo Torre did bring up that mention that he has to interact like 5 times on social media and he has to like maybe do one thing, like one video or something like that. So there was some things that he was obligated to do that he never did. But look at what we're talking about right now, Dime. We're talking about Kawhi's part of this with Aspiration. This has nothing to do with the Clippers. This is Kawhi going to Aspiration and not fulfilling his part of the endorsement deal. So for the Clippers to get tagged for that, I don't even think they should be. But for Kawhi, it's a terrible look. It's a terrible look for a superstar that we all know, like, he's very quiet. He keeps to himself. He doesn't want to do marketing. And that's why a lot of people have gotten on him because he doesn't represent the organization and doesn't push for the organization as other superstars do. So it's just such a fine line because the Clippers are around it and Kawhi's around it, but are they directly correlated?
Yeah.
Are they directly connected? That's where they're going to have to prove.
That part was, I have to reread some of those bullet points, but if I'm not mistaken, even that employee, the anonymous employee, said that in every single request, there was a way to get out of it written down that Kawhi could get out of everything, even the reposting, even the liking of a post from Aspiration. Now, I totally agree with you on that. I was about to tweet last night when I saw that part. I was like, that's on Kawhi and his camp, not the Clippers. But the part that it gets fishy when everybody was like kind of having their aha moment where, oh, this is weird, is when it said that the Aspiration could terminate the contract if Kawhi is no longer a Clipper. But my defense to that was if the Clippers are partnered up with Aspiration and Aspiration wants their biggest name sponsored by Aspiration and he's no longer on the team, they'd probably want another star player on the Clippers to be sponsored by them, right?
That's exactly what happens. It's not just with the Clippers. So Nate Jones, who did a great job breaking this down, he said, the team introduces the sponsor to player representation, and the player representation and sponsors start negotiating on a potential deal. That's what typically happens, and teams are typically careful not to involve themselves at all beyond the intro, which is what Steve Ballmer actually said. They have the email from November of them introducing the two, but after that, there was literally no involvement from the Clippers, according to Steve Ballmer. Again, I'm not making any concrete comments here because we have to wait for the investigation. I'm going based off of what Steve Ballmer said. So that would line up. Can he have a sponsorship deal with Aspiration? Yeah, sure. But I think that when we get to this and it's like he can void all of this stuff, that's where it's tricky because in his contract, it says you have to do these things, but then he didn't do any of those things and he still kept getting the money. And they also said that Uncle Dennis, who was his advisor, and we know all about him, that he pushed for the payment. When they didn't pay him, he called them and he called the finance department and was like, hey, where's our payment, man? Like, you got to pay up, even though they didn't do any of the things that they did in the contract. That's also fishy. But again, it's Kawhi. with the Clippers sponsorship thing, like other teams do that. Now, I can't pinpoint exactly which teams do it and which players do, but I know that happens. Sponsor for team wants star player for team to be a part of sponsor. Duh. That just makes sense. So again, it's the Clippers part of this is the part where they're going to have hard evidence to prove. But the Kawhi stuff that's shady. It just is.
Yeah. And then my last question before we move on is, did the new report that made it look like the $50 million that Ballmer invested was $50 million that Ballmer invested, and then Kawhi, if you add the new report, the $20 million in stock that he allegedly had, adds up to $48 million, which is almost $50 million. People were using that to say that is even more evidence that Steve Ballmer's money went directly to Kawhi. What did you make of that?
I think the stock part of it, I understand that. I understand that Kawhi and Aspiration had a deal. Adding the stock really doesn't do much for me because, stock, it was a side deal essentially. So I'm going to read what it was. Kawhi Leonard's reported side deal with Aspirations is nearly twice what was originally reported, which puts the questionable commitment to him closer to Clippers owner Steve Ballmer's $50 million investment. So it's essentially like a match of the investment. And the $20 million of it was the stock part of it. I don't think that's that big of a deal. I think what they're going to hammer in on is the $28 million and him getting paid $7 million per year. Now, I will say this last thing. Ballmer seems to want to turn it around on Aspiration and be like, well, they're the ones that conned us. We're trying to figure out what they did, as opposed to let's look at what you guys were doing with Aspiration. So that exclusive about the stock, it doesn't really do much for me because I feel like players have stock in companies all the time. And I don't know. I think that when we get into the stock parts of it, I think a lot of players own stock in different companies, and owners tell the players, hey, invest in this stock because it's good for your brand or it'll help you 5x your money. I remember OBJ signed a deal with the Rams where it was like, you're only going to get paid in crypto. Like, you didn't even sign a real cash contract. It was just crypto because you could make 5x on that. Now, I don't know if he got guidance from the organization, but these deals happen. And it may not be written, but I'm telling you, Dime, like, there is no way that the NBA, the organization that has had their Antetokounmpo brothers sign each other on the Bucks, the NASA still has a job. Like, Bronny got drafted by the Lakers, and just so happens that LeBron was on the team. Like, you're going to tell me that this doesn't happen a lot more? I mean, that's my kind of last point here, is that I think it's a little bit more widespread, but we just don't really hear about it.
Yeah, I'd say the biggest difference is we'd technically be breaking the rules. That's definitely technically not breaking the rules. It's just like using your power and connections, I guess, and appeasing your star player. But coming up, going to be giving our final take on what we think is going to happen to your LA Clippers. All right, Money. Last question. What do we think is going to happen? I don't know because I've never been, I've never seen anything like this before. Obviously, the Joe Smith stuff with Minnesota was when I was very young, when we were both very young. So it was not something that I, remember seeing in real time. I don't know how long this is going to take. People are saying it might take months. So we'll be like into the season when this is going on. Everyone's going to forget about it. I mean, what do you think is going to happen? Do you think they're going to be penalties? Do you think they're going to find anything? I released an episode today saying I don't think they're going to find anything concrete because I also don't think that the league wants to go to battle with something like this because it's a bad look for the league. And with All-Star Weekend, like, are they going to suspend Steve Ballmer with All-Star Weekend being at his house? I just don't know about that. But what's your opinion? You're already nodding your head, which makes me feel like you're agreeing with me.
I do agree with you. The Clippers are hosting the 2026 NBA All-Star Game at their brand new palace that was privately funded by Steve Ballmer. Adam Silver has been outspoken about how much he loves that place, and he was at the groundbreak. He was at the All-Star game announcement. So it would be a horrible look for the All-Star game to have the center of the league's attention at the All-Star weekend, and Steve Ballmer got suspended. The Clippers are under investigation. Terrible look. Do you really want to take Steve Ballmer to court? That's another thing. Do you really want to open that can of worms? Because the owners seem to be in good graces with Steve Ballmer. And the owners, I know that there's some stuff out there about maybe they could lose money off of this, but back in 1999, like, the Timberwolves did the same thing, and he got 3 cheap one-year deals before the big deal, and it was a $3.5 million fine. Smith's contracts were voided. They lost 5 first-round picks. The Clippers, you're going to have to find those picks because they don't have many left, first of all. It would be future picks. I get that. I don't think anything that severe happens, Dime. Like, I think maybe fines. I don't think they're going to void anybody's contract. There's people, Dime, saying that, oh, well, they're going to void Kawhi's contract. He could sign a mid-level exception with Oklahoma City Thunder. It's like, come on, man. That's not happening. So I don't think the punishment will be as severe as a lot of people are saying. They're saying, ban the Clippers, get rid of Steve Ballmer as an owner. This is it. The downfall of the Clippers. There will be something, but I don't think it's going to be as severe as Joe Smith, and I don't think it's going to be as severe as a lot of people are expecting.
So you think they're actually going to get dinged on something, though?
I do.
Okay.
Because their name is attached to this. Their name's attached to it. Whether we like it or not, the Clippers and Steve Ballmer and Kawhi, Kawhi's a part of the Clippers, they're all attached to this aspiration fraud case. So I don't know, like, again, I don't have any concrete thing to go off of. I'm just thinking how many layers of this there are. I don't think that it was a direct correlation between circumventing the salary cap, but I do think that there was some money that was just moving a little bit weird that they may get caught on. But again, like, I don't think that'll warrant 5 picks and voiding contracts.
Yeah, I guess we'll just have to wait and see. I mean, it's just been a weird 48 hours, and as we talked about before we started recording, I mean, it wouldn't be the Clippers if it wasn't something. I mean, going back to almost a little over 10 years ago with the Donald Sterling thing, then we had the DeAndre Jordan thing, and then we had the Randy Shelton thing, and in the 2019 they tried to see if Uncle Dennis was, shady with his, moving of Kawhi from Toronto to LA and what people were promising, and if the Clippers gave him stuff under the table the Lakers couldn't offer and all this stuff. But that's one thing that's really annoyed me is people trying to say that it was before aspiration that we did all this to get Kawhi's signature. But the more I've learned about Kawhi and the more I've learned about how his team operates and how he operates, I don't think he was going to go to the Lakers. I think he really used them as leverage because he wanted his own kind of thing, and he knew that he could get a lot more power with the Clippers, a franchise that hadn't accomplished as much than the Lakers. So, Money Mona, let people know where they can find you. As always, appreciate you coming on, especially at the late hour. And I love, it's always nice to have someone that I can record with late at night.
Yeah, of course, man. It's always a pleasure being on. At GMona48 on X. You can find me at MoneyMo Media TV on all socials if you want to watch my clips. And then I do writing for Sports Illustrated now for the Clippers, Warriors, a bunch of different teams, and at the Sporting Tribune too. So I appreciate you having me on.
Amazing stuff. Make sure to check him out and follow, subscribe to everything Money Mona is doing. One of the best we've got on our side. And of course, make sure you subscribe to Locked On Clippers on the road to 8,000 subscribers before the season starts. Hit the notification bell. And you can subscribe to Dime Dropper as well on YouTube. And you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram and TikTok at Dime Dropper Pod. The age-old proverb continues. Go Clippers.